Hello, everyone on the replay. Thank you for being here. And thank you to the people who are live. I'm glad you're here too, Nisha and Vicky. Today, we are going to talk about conversations that make you money. Money is something that people are often uncomfortable talking about. Some of us were raised that you don't talk about money in public. You don't talk about it with strangers. Sometimes it's just because it provides insecurity. It puts a value on you. Those types of things that make it uncomfortable. Hi, Dee Dee. That make it uncomfortable for people to talk about money. But the problem is, all money conversations happen. All money growth happens with a conversation. So whether you're asking for a raise, you're discussing something with a client, you are discussing something with a banker, even bad financial decisions happen in conversations. So, conversation is the way that you have to grow with money, one way or another. And the very first conversation that you need to have is with yourself, because most people, especially women, aren't comfortable with that. They don't think that they're worth it. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to ask the expert. They assume that their boss is going to give them a raise automatically just because they work hard. That is not how it works. So when people like that who feel small about themselves go to have a money conversation, they present themselves small. They go in hoping. They go in apologizing. They go in over explaining. And when things like that happen, that does not put you in a good position for money. What you need to be doing is be assertive, not aggressive. You need to be direct. You need to state your piece. And then you need to shut up and stop and wait for them to say something. You lead the conversation and then you let them proceed. Now, when people are talking about raises, that's a tough one for them because a lot of people come in and they say, "Hi, I've been working really hard." Well, that's why you get paid, to work really hard. You don't get extra money for working really hard. What you do get extra money for is providing value. So when you are ready to have that conversation, you present the value that you're bringing, the evidence that you have, and the outcome that you want. So you say, I have, in the last 6 months, I have taken on 3 new clients. I've increased our customer satisfaction survey up by 20%. And I just got on the new computer system program that's going to take about a year and a half. So, with doing all of those things, I would like to discuss my compensation. I would like to have insert X number of dollars here and see what they say. You say it and then you shut up and wait for a response from them. Now, hopefully, the good news is that they're going to have a conversation with you about it. But if at any point they say, no, this isn't really a good time, we aren't giving other people raises right now, that type of thing, then your response is, what would have to change to get this increase approved? So you don't just let it go, you challenge them. Now, that's a very respectful question. So when I say challenge, it's not aggressive, it's not nasty, but you put it back in their court. So you continue to lead the conversation. Because if you don't ask, you don't get. And that's just the way it is. There are people with far less qualifications than you who are getting raises because they're asking for them. So you need to be one of those people. This also applies to when you're working with clients. So many people, when they work with clients, They start with, here's a list of all the services that I provide, and here's what my hourly rate is. Bad approach, because they are not paying for your services, they are paying for outcomes. They want to see results. So, what you need to do is present to them what you're going to do and what the projected outcomes are. Don't list all your services. They don't care about the services that you're going to be doing. But they do want to know what outcomes you're going to be providing. And you don't give them an hourly rate, because then they question the hourly rate. They question how many hours it takes you to do something. And many projects should not be based on hourly rate. They should be based on value. So if it takes me, when I was in marketing, it might take me 20 hours to accomplish a branding project for someone. At the time, because this was way back when, I was at $100 an hour. So that's just $2,000. I didn't charge $2,000 for my branding sessions. I charged between $5,000 and $7,500, because that was the value that I was bringing to the table. So you don't, yes, Vicki.
I want to add to that value piece, because what they're actually paying for is that they can't solve something. That's really the
Mhm,
thing. And what is the value of creativity? Because
mhm,
when you're there marketing, you're solving the problem for them that they can't solve for themselves. And
mhm,
that requires creativity. And it requires a type of creativity that even AI doesn't have. AI has all the past creativity. It doesn't have creativity moving forward. And I think that is that is one of the human considerations that is always in. If I'm negotiating a price for a contract, then
mhm,
my creativity is the most expensive thing they're going to pay for.
mhm. Absolutely. You are bringing a level of expertise and experience to the table. And you are leading the conversation with your client. When you list services at an hourly rate, you have now positioned yourself as an employee. You have not positioned yourself as an expert. So you need to use care when you present yourself to people, not just clients, but as you're introducing yourself to people, so that they position you as an expert. Yeah, Vic.
And I always bring a level of excellence. I'm not going to go into the contract saying, here is average work, or even here's above average work. In the sign of creativity, you want to do blow your mind level of excellent work. And
Yes,
then you never have to argue about price again. They're just, once it's at that level of excellence, it's game over for the contract, and you can name whatever price you want.
exactly. Exactly. It's all about the value and what you're bringing to the table. They need to see you as an expert. And part of the way that they see you as an expert is how you present yourself. Again, if you feel small, you're going to present yourself as small. If, however, for example, I could either say I'm a communications mentor. Well, you know, so what? What does that mean? Okay. But if I say I work with people to improve their clarity so that they can get promotions, they can get more opportunities, and they can become leaders. Well, now all you hear is promotions, income, leadership. They don't care about the rest of the stuff. They don't care how you do it. They don't care what your title is. They don't care what your hourly rate is. They want to know, what's this going to cost them? And that's how you need to be presenting yourself in the process. Now, The other thing with clients that you can run into is that you have created a scope of work and you have signed a contract based on this scope of work for this amount of money. And then the scope of work changes. A lot of clients will look at it, and if you don't say something, they're just going to look at this as free stuff, something that you are just doing out of the goodness of your heart. And it's easy then for them to add more things to that process. You need to decide quickly, is it the first thing? Is it something big that you need to say, the scope of work has changed, and to accomplish those things, we're now going to have to increase our cost to X number of dollars. So you're giving them a reason. Again, you're giving them value. The scope of work has changed. And that is because we have added A, B, C, and D. As a result, the delivery date is now pushed back 2 weeks, and the contract will need to be changed to reflect X dollars. You need to lead the conversation, especially when it comes to money. Clients and bosses are not bad people. They have their own budgets to be aware of. They have a process. Well, we do annual reviews, and that's when we talk about increases. Or each year, the company assesses what, if any, cost of living increase there's going to be. We're not talking about a cost of living increase. We're not raising the value of a client's project because of cost of living. We are asking for the raise. We're advising, not asking. We are advising our client of how the scope has changed, or simply that this is it's going to cost to accomplish this result that you want. If you do that, you're not going to get the kind of pushback. I once raised my rates. Again, I'm going way back. I was at $100 an hour when I started my business. And the next year I raised it to 110. Now it's $10. My client looked at it and said, that's a 10% increase. My budgets don't increase 10%. And it became ugly. So I never offered my hourly rate again. I always gave a package price because clients want value and what it costs to accomplish that. They don't need the nitty-gritty details. That's what they're paying you for. So you need to be aware of how you're talking to clients and that you're doing it with authority, with leadership, and you are leading the conversation. This is a conversation you're having. It's not them having a monologue to you. Yes, Vicki.
I'm curious. I haven't had a job in like 35 years, so I don't know what I don't know. So I'm asking this. Back in the day when I did have work and I was working for companies, there was always this thing at the beginning or the end of your first year, and then every subsequent year that followed, that was like a review. And you sat down with the review, and they kind of, um, it was usually the year end review and to see how much of a raise you were going to get and everything else like that. And I was wondering if you're going into that particular thing and you want to get a maximum raise, especially right now, because people are being laid off in huge amounts. How is it that what can you do to prove? Because that's what the problem is. The burden of proof always lands up on the employee. It never lands on, even if you're careful about taking that over or whatever else. And that one burden of proof, how can we go into that conversation more prepared? And I
That's
mean, not like, hi, went to AI. I mean, how can we go into that conversation more prepared to ask for a more than a 1% raise?
exactly. Dee Dee, do you want to
Dee
respond to that first, or do you have a separate thing to talk about?
No, I would like to respond to that one.
Go ahead.
Um, Basically, I mean, if you know you're getting yearly reviews, then you have to be proactive, which
Mhm.
means that during the year on your projects and extra things given and extra assignments and so on, you have to keep a journal, a log of the things you've done and what you, and the day before that review, I used to go in with the university of the list of things I would do. And they would always have one or two complaints to try and keep your salary low. But then when you listed off everything and say, I think these add value to what I've been delivering above and beyond that one incident. And it always worked.
Yeah, that's the answer I was going to give, Dee Dee. It's perfect. It all comes down to value. It's
So
not
you have to keep track of the value that you bring through the whole year. They should pay you for that.
exactly. What I did was I would maintain results. So I would always come back to them and say, well, when I did the ABC construction project, I increased their sales by 98%.
Yeah. The
So,
outcome is the thing that you want.
exactly. So, I already had those numbers together because I shared them with the client. And then it was just a matter of, as Dee Dee said, preparing for that meeting because the appraisals aren't about value. The
Yeah.
appraisals are, did you come to work on time? Were you prepared? Did you do your job description? Things like that that don't mean squat. What they want to pay you on is value. So being prepared with that information in advance so that you can respond to that, you can add value to the conversation by telling them the value you've brought to your job.
I just think, you know, this is just me, but the way that we have to communicate with companies in order to bring value is such, I can't even listen sometimes. It makes me angry inside. I mean, do you want the person to work for you or not? You're the owner of the business, and having them jump through hoops like that and having
Mhm.
to be this kind of aware that just, oh God, it makes me want to pull my hair out. And at the same time, I can see the value in being prepared and having your skill and blah, blah, blah. But if you have to prove to somebody that you're valuable, you don't belong there. You belong at where they're supposed to. And I know there's jobs and life happens and things like that. But oh God, it just makes my hair gray. Oh, see, it happened. Uh, really.
Well, and the bigger corporations, the larger the corporation, the more their appraisals
Mhm,
are going to be
mhm.
generic.
Yeah, because they don't wanna give you a raise.
Exactly.
They want a bigger shareholder profit thing, and so that's kinda the thing for me. Thank
Yeah.
you
And
for
so
that.
they think cost of living is a raise.
So, I would like to ask you one question after Dee Dee answers. I wanna ask you, what do you do as the employer to talk to the employee, the person that's working for you,
Mhm.
to come to some agreement that's respectful and dignified? But I wanna hear what Edie has to say, and it's your
Mhm.
gig, so you run it.
Sure, Miss Dee Dee. Thank you.
You know, I feel a lot the same way you do. This conversation tends to bring bile to the back of my throat. And it's very difficult. But one thing I've noticed that's really come up that I've learned from by watching these people is there are a lot of top quality people, especially in AI and cybersecurity, that flat out say, um, please, this is the value I'm adding to you. And when they come back with this, no or harder tones, they look at them and they say, there's no problem me teaching another corporation exactly what I've taught yours.
Mhm,
And I'm more than willing to step out. I
mhm,
mean, I have done that twice in my life, where I've told them, this is my guardrail. And if you run into it, I will leave
mhm,
with no hesitation. That was said initially. And this is, where the point comes that I take it to action. You have to have confidence. If your skills are as good as you say they are, sell them to another company that's willing to pay. And the first thing I look for is a company that's growing, not too big, not too small, because I
mhm,
want to be treated human. And when they get big like that, they think they're kings. And
mhm.
it's very sad when they say no kings. I think it has a lot to do with business companies as well. You know,
True.
Yeah,
We are definitely the people are suppressed by having to ask for a raise and having to do
yeah.
the they do, but communicating about those things are the only way we're going to get through them.
mhm,
Um, that has to be like the skill set that arguably brings peace.
mhm. In terms of your question, Vicky, about as the employer, what do you do when people come to you with this? Um, I have worked for large corporations and I have had my own small companies with employees. And I've never had anyone ever come to me and ask for a raise. Never.
That means you're on top of it, right?
Well, yeah, you pay them what they're worth,
Mhm.
and it's not fair. And maybe I would end up getting sued somewhere along the way if people knew what my payroll was. But there were
Mhm.
some employees who were making significantly more than others. And the only
Yeah.
reason the other guy was getting what he was getting is because the law required a minimum wage.
Mhm.
Yes. It's so interesting. Bill Bartman, when he was mentoring me years
Mhm,
back, he would say, at the end of the year, I cut the low-hanging fruit off. The bottom 4% were just gone. I wanted
mhm,
more productive people, and the people who are up here got a boatload of money, and they got profit sharing and things like that, and I thought that was so smart. And
mhm,
then those that were just kind of average or below average, they were just gone. And I thought that was a good way because everything's based on culture and production and, you know, being in line with that. But talking about that, it's like the way I see this conversation is you have to talk and know how to talk to get a good raise, to be able to express the value that you bring anywhere. It's not just to the job, but it's anywhere to be
mhm,
able to say, this is the value I bring and expressing that in words. And also, there's a point where if you maintain your level of excellence, everybody below you will just drop. People, everybody can write one book. Now,
mhm,
40 books later, not everybody's doing that. So
mhm,
at that point, if I say I want to write a book with you, nobody's going to say no. That's where you want your level of excellence to be so that
mhm,
you're like, nobody's not going to hire you
mhm,
because you've done these things before. But when you walk into an interview or you're negotiating a contract or you're literally asking for a raise, the negotiation table is all built around not your level of excellence, but your ability to communicate your value to that person. And I love that you just said nobody ever had to ask for a raise.
Mhm.
And I was like, I remember that too, because I'm big on profit sharing. It's
Yes.
like we make a lot of money, you make a lot of money.
Well, and recognition along the way. It may not be that you got an X percent raise, but you did such a great job. There was a gift card waiting for you on your desk when you came in,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, with a thank you note.
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledgement throughout the year
Mhm.
so that they felt appreciated throughout the year and just kept giving more.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Katie, did
I
you
I
want to
would
say?
think, yeah, I think it's a good conversation to have about how an employee adds value to the company to get a raise. This was something I was never communicated to me. I was taught as a laborer, as a poor
Yeah.
class, underclass laborer. I did what I was told. Nobody talked about adding value. If they didn't tell me, you didn't do it because you could get in trouble and you could get into a lawsuit. You did what you were told. You were where you were supposed to be. And obedience and submission were the important roles.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the conversation needs to happen is what is having value, and have that conversation. How do I know I'm adding value? What do those things mean? It wasn't until I had a boss at the university tell me these things, because I didn't even recognize my own value. So
Mhm.
it was really a good conversation to have. What is added value to your employer?
Exactly. You brought up a good point, though, and it's much more difficult if you're a laborer, if you're the janitor at the school, to ask for a raise. Because to your point, you have a very specific job. There's not an opportunity to say, I clean 10 more classrooms than usual because your job's to clean all of them.
Mhm.
So it's tougher to find the added value, not the value, but the added value to justify being able to ask for an added compensation. But asking is critical, and asking based on value is how you do it. And once you present your value, you stop talking. The ball's in their court to respond. Don't over explain yourself. And if they say no, then the question is, what would have to change for me to get the raise? And then that tells you where you go from there. But again, if you don't ask, you don't get. Now, there's another group of people I want to talk about, and these would be advisors, bank, real
Yeah.
estate agent, financial advisor, people who are dealers of, of gold and coins and things like that. Those people who are experts in their field. And so many people, they don't ask questions. They just, and that's why going to the independent woman, that's why people don't have ownership, because they just they go along like sheep. They don't ask questions. Sometimes they don't even read the contracts they sign because the expert said XYZ. Well, this is a place you need to have communication too. It's your money, it's your asset. You need to be willing to put on your big girl panties and say, what do you get paid for selling this to me? What would you recommend that I do? Um,
And why? Why? What would you
Why?
recommend that I do and why?
And
Because
why?
he's gonna recommend the thing that he gets the most profit from. So the
Exactly.
why is really important. Why is this good for me?
Exactly.
And I
But
think to your point, most people don't know how to advocate for themselves because they don't know what questions to ask and they don't know what value they're bringing to the advisor.
mhm,
They think the advisor is the only form of value, not what their value is to the advisor.
exactly. Exactly. They are making money off of you.
That's right.
It benefits them for you to go with them. In the case of some financial advisors, they get more profit, more commission if they offer A instead of B. And
That's
so
right.
surprisingly, all their clients get A when it's
Yeah.
not necessarily the best choice for them. So you have to advocate for yourself. You need to be willing to ask the questions that people want to know. Do you, things like, if this were your money, would you do it? Um,
Mhm.
you need to find out what they're getting from offering this to you. You need to make sure you're getting the best deal. And you can't just go and say, this isn't a used car thing where you can say, well, I'm only going to pay $25,000 and not more. Um, you can't, yes, you can do that, that you can do that from a negotiation standpoint. But first, you need to educate yourself. And you need to do that by asking questions. So you need to stand up for yourself when you're talking to experts because they're not experts. They happen to do what they do. They probably know more than you do, but they're human and there's something in it for them. So you need to prepare yourself with the questions you're going to ask. Vicky.
Yeah, one of the important things for everyone to know when they're asking questions is that um, you go out and you get a real estate license and you're a licensed realtor, but that doesn't make you an expert at real estate.
Mm-hmm.
So you can sell a product for a company, a real estate investment, a REIT, a package, or whatever, a house, whatever. It still doesn't make you an expert. And that's the thing with advisors. We see them as experts, but they're just licensed professionals. They're broke until you give them your money. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. They're totally broke. They have to build a book of business over years, decades, sometimes 20 years of working before they can be any kind of advisor. And that doesn't make them a good advisor if they're only advising for one company. Like
Mm-hmm.
I work for Mutual, or I work for Vanguard, or I work for Fidelity. All they have is Fidelity speak. There is no that advisor piece. And that thing you were talking about, advocating is and asking those questions about them is, you know, knowing like the tough questions, like how much money do you have under management? Which is what's your book of business? That'll
Mm-hmm.
let me know if you know what you're doing or you don't know what you're doing.
Another question to ask is, can you explain that to me in simpler terms? Because there are a lot of experts that need to show you they're the expert. So they talk in all the jargon. And even if they're not trying to do
Insane.
that, yeah, they're talking in things that you may not be familiar with simply because you don't deal with it. It doesn't mean you're not smart. It just means that you don't understand the jargon. So you have to be willing to ask, can you explain that in simpler terms? Yes, Dee Dee.
I'm sorry. Thank you for letting me interrupt. This is one place where I find having AI in my home is an absolute lifesaver. I go on and ask AI about the company, about what questions to ask on which product, and so on. And I kind of prepare myself for those kind of conversations. And I really love what they come up with normally. Has a
I
lot of
have a
information.
I have a really contrarian viewpoint to that because what AI knows is the past. It doesn't know the future. So what it's going to do is give you past standard questions that it's going to find off Reuters and Bloomberg and anything else. And those questions that are going to be asked aren't going to have anything to do with the person in front of you or the company. And based on all of the learning about the company, you can learn about everything else. You can learn about what they've done wrong, what they've done right, how much money they've had or lost, blah, blah, blah. But every single year, the prospectus changes. Every single year, AI doesn't know how the prospectus changed unless you know to ask it, how has the prospectus changed from 2025 to 2026? What are the fees of this company? It's like you have to know what questions to ask. And the thing about communicating them is that the guy in front of you can be new and not know what he's doing. And you've got $100,000 to invest. So, Mr. Guy in front of you who doesn't know what he's doing is going to do exactly what his company is going to tell him to do. And that company is make sure you invest her in this program over here because we get 7% fees or 8% fees. They're looking at the back end, and this guy over here is going to go, okay, he's new. He doesn't know. He's going to follow what they tell him to do. And he's going to sell you something that gives them control of your money, big fees. And in that moment, if you don't ask him, what are the fees for this product? What's the yield on this product? Because if your fees are at 7 or 8% and you get a 10% return on the year, you've only made 2%.
Mhm.
Has to be inside each time you sit down with the person and then asking them, how long have you been doing this? How much do you have under management? Because how much you have under management tells me how good a salesman you are, that you're really either good at closing the deal or not. And
Yes.
what we're looking for is evidence of what's happening, and that only can happen through communicating and knowing how to communicate what's their value. And if he's new, there's no value. He's not bringing you any value if he's a new advisor. There's even if he has 10 or 15 years experience, he's not really bringing you any value. He's just bringing a book of business and sales of a product from a company. It's like, how does he bring value to you? Not through his product. If he can't explain that there's no value, why are you doing business with him? And that's it. It's like that expression of value is in your job. It's that ability to communicate value and why. And so the ability to advocate for yourself, I think, is important.
I do think there's a place for AI to do the research on the company and what you're doing and get some basic questions, but you really need to take it past that. You need to ask more personal questions like the fees, like how long you've been in business, because you've got and I'm going to talk about financial advisors for a minute. Um, you either have the newbie who's following the company line where everybody ends up in this particular portfolio, or you have the one who doesn't know squat and is expecting you to tell him what you want to invest in. And that's when you get up and walk away. But asking questions is huge when you're dealing with any type of expert. And
Yeah.
I'll be right there, Vic. And that doesn't just mean financial advisors, bankers, realtors. That means contractors,
Mhm.
other people who are your automotive repair guy, that people who are experts. Unless now I trust my auto guy, and if he tells me something, I don't question him. But
Yeah.
if a contractor comes in to do some significant work, I have a whole list of questions for him because, I'm not just going to nod politely because he's been in business for 10 years. So you have to, because it's my money that I'm going to spend, and I need to have a conversation about how I spend my money. Vicki, what did you want to say?
Well, I also think that articulating the questions in whatever you're doing, because a lot of vendors that provide services, such as a financial analyst or a contractor or whatever else, they get a kickback from, like, let's say a job needs new plumbing, and they may get a 40% kickback from this company for you saying to your customer, we're going to use this company. It's
Mhm.
the same with, like, attorneys. Attorneys, they're knowledgeable. There's a difference between being knowledgeable and experienced. So what happens is the attorney can make all of these financial plan decisions based on how much kickback he's going to get from working with this company and this company and this company and this company, not because the product they're offering you is the best product for you.
Mhm.
It's this, again, they only make money on your money. And being able to ask the correct question, or being able to go in and say, show me how you make money on this. Show me
Mhm.
everything. And while they're showing you how much of a kickback do you get from this vendor, this vendor, this vendor, you want to know, does he have your best interest at heart or no? So that's the part of the advocating during communication, I think, is the most important skill set.
Communicating about your money is critical, and you only
Mhm.
do that by asking questions. Dee Dee, one quick thing before I move on.
Yeah, just a quick story. Sorry, it just reminded me about communicating to contractors. I had the water heater here changed, and the guy came in. He was very unsure about the whole situation, made me feel very insecure, made me feel like, oh no, you're going to have to pay $4,000 more to put this heater in than I originally thought. And, I can't do this and I need to pull that off. So I called a friend of mine who's a professional and had him come to supervise the guy putting it in. And he came in, and watching him communicate with knowledge to this guy just cut him down. He was trying to hose me for $4,000 more.
Mhm.
And I was very glad that I had that friend to bring over. But I had to hire an expert to go ahead and control the prices, and this whole conversation about, costs and so on. So,
It's
yeah, you got
unfortunate.
to, yeah,
It's
they
unfortunate
really
that
do
that
try to
happened.
help you.
I'm going to move on to the next group, and that is people who approach you for an investment. They have this new business. They heard about this great stock, et cetera, et cetera. If you have any money, we all get these conversations. We just, it's the best thing since sliced bread. Too many people answer, well, that's interesting. And then they get sucked in. That's interesting is not what you say. You want to know, how do I make money on this? How do you know what your return on investment is? What's the worst case scenario of this situation? You need to have a list of questions that put them on the spot, because it's your money and you don't want to invest with someone just because they're your friend or because it's the newest trend. You need to know that you're making the decision based on a financially responsible choice. And the only reason that you can make that is um, if you ask the questions, the hard questions. Hi, welcome to the recording. And your name is blocked because of the stop recording. So I'm looking at your picture. Are you Ahmed? Ahmed may not be able to communicate with us right now, and he's gone. Anyway, He's a fairly new member. So that ties into boundaries. Boundaries in all aspects of your life are critical. Boundaries with your money are also critical. You need to be able to say no. You need to be able to say no and not feel like you have to give them an entire explanation as to why. That's none of their business. No, I don't think that works for me right now. That's all you have to say. You don't have to, you can give yourself time to make a decision. Don't let somebody push you into, well, this price is only good till 5 o'clock today. That's BS. If you want my business, I can talk to you tomorrow after I've had a chance to think about it, because this is a large sum of money. Boundaries are very, very important. And the only way that you protect your boundaries is by having a conversation about them. Communicating about money is critical. You need to protect your assets. Money is one of your assets. If you have conversations about money, you can make more money. And that's a good thing. If you don't have conversations about money, then you're not getting it. If you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't maintain your boundaries with your clients and a growing scope of work, with somebody who wants you to invest with them, with buying a car and they tell you the deal is only good till 5 and you want more time, have the conversation and stand up for yourself. Vicki.
This is so important, what you're saying, because a lot of when people are asking for money, they bring a pitch deck. And the pitch deck is their way of communicating why they want the money, what it's going to be used for, blah, blah, blah. And then when they are pitching that, the question that goes through your mind is, do I think this team is capable of pulling off what they're going to pull off or what they say they're going to pull off? And the deciding factor is how they communicate in the pitch deck. And this is where pitching your idea or learning to be able to talk about that is that value conversation we were talking about before. And I just wanted to say, while we were talking about it, that communications is that all that level. If you're looking for investors or you're looking at your friend and saying, this is how I want to invest, how you're talking about that, how you're communicating that, the clarity and control you have and everything about how you speak about it, that's going to either close the deal or not. And I think everybody's protecting their money and also looking to invest in that way as well. Just want to add.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Ultimately, it comes down to your perception of yourself and you're willing to converse. You need to believe that you are worth making more money. You need to believe that you can talk to your boss. And if that means having to write down on a piece of paper before you have one of these conversations, I am allowed to ask questions about my money, then write it down. I am allowed to say no without an explanation. Write it down. I'm allowed to take time to make a decision. Write it down. Whatever you need to do, but whatever it is, you need to converse about it. You need to ask for that raise. You need to tell that client about the value and what the cost for that value is. You need to be able to tell or to ask questions of that expert because you're spending your hard-earned money with them. You need to be willing to say no to an investor And if you say yes to an investor, it's because you have asked 100 questions. And those questions have to do with your money. What's the worst case scenario? How do I make money on this? Those types of questions, in addition to making sure that they can actually pull off what they want to pull off. So it all comes down to conversation. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? Nope.
I just want
Well,
to say that I love this. I love these master classes. Love them. And thank you for doing them for us.
thank you. So I'm going to wish you adieu. Oh, Dee Dee, do you want to say something?
It would be nice to do some part of having the communication on money with family. Did I miss that section?
We actually talked about that last week when you were out.
Oh,
We talked
okay.
about having hard conversations, and some of that was
Mhm,
having hard conversations at work where you've got to
mhm,
tell your employees we're cutting budgets, we're laying off. Um, but part of that too was having a hard conversation with your family.
mhm.
So the
Okay.
replay is there, and if you sort of fast forward to the end, um, the
You can
fact
get
that,
to the family part.
yeah, you really need to, first of all, you don't hide it, because if you hide it, it just gets worse. You all need to be on the same page because you need to be cutting back together. You don't have mom deciding, well, we're going to cancel violin lessons, but I'm not going to tell you why. There needs to be an honest conversation, including age appropriate children in the conversation. But being honest and getting buy in are the two most important things.
What is age appropriate children in financial situations?
It depends on the kid. I know some 8-year-olds that you can discuss something like that with. I know some 17-year-olds that aren't ready to really get it because they're still acting like they're 8. So you need to figure out how's your kid going to react. You don't want your child to be afraid. But if you have a precocious younger child or you have a teenager, they should be included in that conversation because they need to cut back too. They can't do Uber Eats every night just because, they're making money doesn't mean that they should be spending that money that way. So by being responsible and having family discussions about money, you're teaching them what you can do, what they should do as they're moving forward. Great. Thank you for your time. I so appreciate when you come. Thank you to the people watching the replay. I hope it's helpful to you. And I'll see you next week for another exciting topic. Goodbye, Nisha. Goodbye, Dee Dee.